Call to order the special meeting of the Board of Finance for November the 6th.
Lisa's telling me to wait. Yeah, hold on. Sorry, we jumped the gun, Lisa. We're recording this, so. Good. Okay, go ahead. One more time.
Call to order the special meeting of the Board of Finance for November the 6th.
Yep, and we call to order the special meeting of the Board of Selectmen for November 6th. And Joe?
Call to order the special meeting of the Permanent Building Commission to evaluate the highway garage for 1160 South Street.
First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda is the discussion of the purchase of 1160 South Street to relocate the highway garage, and I would like to invite Kevin Casey up here to give us an update on the due diligence that has been performed to date from our last meeting. Thank you.
So I have a number of things for the board.
Great. Yeah, let's pass them out.
Thank you. Thank you. No, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? No. I don't think so. Can you hear me now? Wow, you got to actually. You got to be a. Yeah, but I got to hold it, like touch it almost. Okay, so, okay, how's that? Is that all right? Okay, I'm Kevin Casey, and I have been working with the town for almost a year now on the proposal to relocate the highway garage from Filer Place to 1160 South Street. We have been through various meetings with the boards that are here tonight, and also with planning and zoning, and taking this like one step at a time. My most recent meeting with the planning and zoning department and with the joint board of finance and board of selectmen, I actually likened this process to doing a puzzle or a Rubik's Cube, where there seems to be a lot of moving parts, and it's very challenging at the outset to see if we can make all the parts come together so that what we do is actually truly in the best interest of the town. And I think we have succeeded in doing that, and we're going to hear and hopefully present to you the facts of that and why we think it's such a good idea for the town. Without being overly redundant, you know that this project started because of the desire to develop Filer Place. I approached the town and inquired as to how I could do that, and the town, in the person of the first selectman, said, you know, you got to find us a home for the garage. So about a year and a half ago, we proposed to do a build-to-suit, a new building, and over on Route 159 on East Street and on the site of the old Wicks property. And we got pretty far down the road with that in front of most of all of you. And it turned out that really the town didn't have the appetite for the cost of a newly constructed building. So before we made any formal requests to that end, we sort of looked around for an alternative. And we first proposed the building at 1160 South Street and went to the town and realized that there was much to be done in order to make it a building that could house the town garage, but if it were to be possible, the town would also benefit greatly from the inclusion of about 11,000 square feet of office space, because, as you all know, the town is challenged with the size of the current town hall, which is about to undergo major renovation, and the fact that the town rents space, significant space, off-site, and that this would allow the town, if the town deems it to be in its best interest, to relocate certain offices that the town would no longer have to rent, which is I think everyone acknowledges is a tremendous benefit long term for the town. So, because it seemed to make sense to go further, we began the process of it started with escorting people from the Permanent Building Commission through the building, early this year, and sort of assessing the big issues that needed to be addressed, and we're gonna get to those in a minute, because people brought up a series of concerns, and I would say 95% of them were valid and important and things that had to be addressed, and actually it makes the project better that we were able to point things out, see things that needed improvements. So I'm going to go through right now some of the things that we have done and accomplished so far. We went pretty far down the road with the idea of using the building and having the entrance and exit of the building in the rear. And as I said, we got pretty far down the road, but try as we might with our architects and engineers, it really, and there was a lot of input from the town and people who were watching, that it really was unwieldy at best, probably not possible to handle the internal circulation of all the trucks at the same time. So using the end of the building with the garage, with the overhead doors where they are, or even expanding them, while we thought we could possibly make it work, it was far from ideal, and more honestly, it was probably not workable. So with that in mind, we went to the next door neighbors, and some of this has been public, but for those who are might not know it, the parking concern, Executive Valley Parking, was in the process of being sold to a national company called Park and Fly, and that was tricky because we were trying to negotiate to acquire some extra land, and they really weren't in a position to negotiate back because they were in contract, and if you know real estate, you know that they really were bound by that. So as it got closer, we actually did enter into a tri-party agreement once the closing was imminent. And what this does is it allows us to reduce the amount of land that we were programming to take from what's called Lot 3, which is the economic development town-owned lot to the north of 1160 South Street. And our first iteration, and with the help of Jerry Turbot in the engineering department and Bill Hawkins, our first iteration of this program was to locate the salt shed in the area that's up here. It says sort of where it says shaded area. In that area there was going to be a 3-acre annexation, if you will, from 1160, which will eventually be a town-owned parcel. So it would always stay town land, but it was going to be utilized for the salt shed because we felt we needed the extra acreage for that. And you'll also note that there's an access drive that's shown as a shared access drive with our neighbor to the north. The town has the easement in perpetuity to access its land the 21 or 23 acres of land, that's Lot 3. And that road was designed for, the hope is that that will eventually be developed as part of the industrial park. So that road was designed to accommodate a large number of trucks. The grade and the access and egress are better at that point than they are at 1160. So it was really the town's idea, working with the DPW folks, that said, the town said, we already have access over that road. It needs a little more improvement across the wetlands to get to the back, but it is our right of way. And so if we use that, it sort of alleviates the problem. Another concern that was brought up, and again, it was somewhat of a valid concern, was that the grade of the entrance and exit of 1160 South Street is fairly steep and fairly narrow. It was done when the building before Route 75 was as busy as it is. I mean, it did serve trucking interests for basically for the last 30 years. So I don't think it would have precluded using those driveways. But there's no question that by the question being raised as it was, that we took a look at it and said, well, if the town has this access anyway, and this access is brand new and has been designed for a large volume of heavy truck use because of what could possibly, I mean, if Amazon comes to the back, there's going to be 100 trucks a day going in and out of that driveway. So certainly the 14 DPW trucks, it could certainly accommodate those very easily. And it is an improvement over going over the existing driveways. So with that in mind, we sat down with our neighbors to the south, the valet parking concerns, both the local Piccolos and Park and Fly from Atlanta, who purchased the concern. And we struck a deal to acquire 1.4 acres, including 25 feet along our southern boundary, and about an acre in the rear, directly in the rear of the property. This was really a tremendous swing, because it also allows now for the town not to have to give up the 3 acres where the salt shed was going to have to be, and it maintains that for future economic development. And it also, I was able to work it into the budget because we'll no longer have to clear and grade and pave and stormwater manage and bring utilities to the raw land we were going to develop, because the 1 acre parcel down below is already developed. So we will situate the salt shed on the 1 acre immediately behind and connect those two, our 1160 parcel, and now the new. You'll see in your handout that I gave you that we have a new boundary, new lot lines, which will be drawn, and it'll all be one property. So this was important because at the root of this transaction, if you will, was that we wanted to be able to utilize the side of the building. It was brought to our attention by several people, some people on the Board of Finance, some people on the Permanent Building Commission, everybody really. Wouldn't it be better if the building had garage door, overhead doors on the broad side, so that the trucks wouldn't have to worry about internal circulation, getting around, 3-point turns. And so, working with our architect, who I'll introduce in a moment, the building sets up beautifully for, now that we have the extra space on the south side of the property, for 8 overhead doors, which would be 14 by 16 feet high, 14 feet wide, 16 feet high, and that will create 16 bays, double stacked bays. There, a month or two ago, we had a tour, and we invited almost everybody who's here, and anybody really on boards and commissions, to come and walk through the property. And there was some concern that if we were at the time still using the end, that if there was an emergency, if all the trucks had to get out at once. Well, we've now sort of solved that problem, and this is really, in the words of one of the Board of Finance members, it's starting to look more like a garage. There was is it a warehouse? Is it a garage? Well, now clearly it's a garage, and you can see here the representation of the 8 overhead doors and how the trucks would sit in the garage in double stack bays, leaving plenty of room for open space for cold storage. And this is 18,000 square feet, and remaining with a loading dock, a wash bay, and all the work that we will do, and I'll get to that in a second. But this is bigger than the current DPW garage on Filer Place. I think the space is 20 feet high, so we will have room for the crane, the lifts, and the wash bay inside, in addition to those 16 bays. But you can see from this representation that you see the office space in the front, and it's really important to understand that, you know, when this process started, and between the time where it was sort of decided that the town didn't want to build new, and our second go round at this, the first selectman was asked by the Board of Finance to do an analysis of all the town-owned land and other parcels that might qualify to do this. The town needs a new garage. At least most of the people think so. And so I think it was the town planner who implemented that analysis and came back and realized that that really there was no parcel that offered as much, and building that offered as much opportunity as this, I think for a number of reasons. One, it's an industrial zone. It's an industrial building in an industrial zone. That's important. There's other parcels of land in the center of West Suffield, in the village, that people say, oh, you know, this would be like a great place for the garage. Well, if it's not industrial, if it's not an industrial zone, you're really asking to sort of put a square peg in a round hole. The cost to construct new, and we have an architect here who's working on a project right now in Cromwell, a DPW garage, and he can speak to that. But the cost to construct new would be, for this size of a building, would be at least $1 million more than we will be able to do with a full renovation. So it's an industrial building, an industrial zone. It's served by water and sewer, or will be, because the water and sewer town has brought the water and sewer right to the property line. So part of the benefit of doing this is that we hook up to the public sewer, the WPCA, and to the public water. The building's already sprinklered, and we'll get to the upgrades of the sprinkler system. But so there's a lot of inherent value in this building, subject to the improvements and betterments that we are scheduled to make. But on top of all that, you can't discount the fact that if somebody else had come up with a building or a parcel to build a building, they're not going to get 11,000 square feet of office space. It's just more than a throw-in. It's a tremendous bonus for the town, and something that I think everybody needs to be cognizant of. It's not the reason to do the deal, but it is a really compelling add-on that the town can benefit from for a long time to come. We'll get in a minute. We'll get into the benefits overall for the town, but that's pretty much the configuration that we will be creating. So, as I said, we started this process by having people from the Permanent Building Committee and the various boards in the town offices, the building inspector, the town engineer, people walk through, town planner, walk through the building. And so we had to see, it's a 40-year-old building, so the town doesn't want to invest a lot of money in a 40-year-old building unless the building is brought to the standard that it has to be. So right off the bat, on the northern edge of the roof for the whole 300 feet, there's evidence of rust and degrading on the metal deck, which happened because the gutter system was probably not sized properly and probably not maintained properly over the years, so that there had been ponding, which is fairly typical. It's a slanted, a slanted roof, but on the north side, as we all know in New England, you get freezes, you get ice dams, and so over time there was some rust evidence of rust, some places worse than others. And we looked at that, and we were a little bit there was a little bit of trepidation because there's a 30-year warranty on the roof, of which 20 years remain. And we wanted to make sure that if we were going to repair the roof in anticipation of the town, at the town's behest, that we would not, ruin the 20 years remaining on the warranty. And I'm happy to say that working with the right roofing company, we were able to go to the manufacturer and to of the original roof, and the 20-year warranty will remain in place. So the source of that problem, the gutters and the downspouts, will be replaced and sized properly. We will install thermostatically controlled ice melt system to keep it from happening again inadvertently. Even if they're sized right, it could happen. And we'll connect the stormwater. We'll connect the leaders to the stormwater management system, and we will negotiate with the town a gutter maintenance contract, reasonable going forward. Those are really important steps that you would take if you were, whatever building you were doing. As a result of that water, there was a little bit of damage to about 30 blocks on the north wall, and so part of the contract with the roofing company is to replace the cement blocks that have been degraded, and then ultimately wash and paint the entire building inside and out. So, continuing with the improvements and betterments to the garage, the second big item that came up, and it came up as a result of due diligence, is that the town wanted to see if 14 trucks and lifts and crane, if the floor, the load-bearing capacity of the floor was sufficient. And so the town hired an engineer, a structural engineer, and we did, and independently, and both engineers came back and said, no, it's not sufficient. And to make it sufficient, you need to pour 6 inches of reinforced concrete, and then it will be sufficient. So that came from the town's engineer, and it also came from our engineer. So that became part of the program. We have to install a center trench drain the length of the garage, and a wash bay drain, and then an oil and grease separator where that connects into the public water system outside the building, the subterranean. We're installing the 8 new 14 by 16 overhead doors on the south side of the garage, including the structural steel lintels and whatever has to be done to ensure, from an engineering point of view, that it's the structurally sound way to do it. The sort of, and I'll let my architect here discuss that in a little more detail. But the good news is that it's doable. It's just it's this kind of thing you got to do it right. We don't just put garage doors into 8 garage doors into a wall. And then we're going to install the wash bay and include movable curtains, which is just, the wash bay is like a power washing system that the town already has paid a lot of money for. It's at Filer Place, but it hasn't been installed yet, so it'll be installed in the new garage. So finally, in the garage, we have to construct an internal cement block room for hazardous materials, an oil room, and an interior sign room, which has to do with the fumes that come from painting. Install an automotive garage ventilation system per the code. There's been a lot of discussion about how to do this. Ultimately, we'll be driven by what the code says we have to do. Certain contractors that I'm working with say that ventilation in the roof is sufficient, or in the high walls. Others say that certain codes require that a self-contained system with drop-down piping. So whatever the code says has to be done is what we'll do. We have to install structural steel support for the crane, and we have to upgrade the existing fire suppression system to code. Now, that's kind of a loaded statement. The sprinkler system was never hooked up because it didn't have public water in the building. So it had what's called a Siamese valve. If it had ever needed to be used, a fire truck would come up and hook onto the valve outside the building and flood the system. So because it was never used, and it wasn't hooked up to public water, it couldn't be certified or licensed. So we know we had the fire system, the whole system inspected, and to make sure that from lack of use there wasn't any degradation to the piping. And we're happy to say that there's no corrosion of any kind, and that the pressure test held indefinitely for an hour, so there's no leaking or anything associated with that. It won't be certified until the public water is hooked up, but the contract with the town is such that as far as this whole project goes, the town will not take ownership of the building unless everything is done to the town's satisfaction, including that the fire suppression system is not only working, but is certified and licensed. Also, upstairs in the second floor of the office, for some reason when it was finished over, the sprinkler heads were not dropped into the acoustical ceiling. So when I say upgrade, really that's what that's about. There'll be some. It's included in the budget that there's some minor cost upgrade associated with upgrading the system. And then finally, in the garage, there are 2 bathrooms now. The first bathroom will be refurbished, completely redone, and will be a unisex ADA bathroom out in the garage area. And the second bathroom will be converted to a unisex shower changing area, like a small locker room with a shower. And then we have a room set aside that will be a bunk room for the DPW workers in case of an extended emergency situation. So these are things that I don't know that they have now, but really, even if you were building a new building, you would probably want to do all these things, and the fact that we can do them while we're refurbishing the building I think is pretty impressive. Now, relative to the improvements and betterments in the office, the most important biggest one is the installation of an elevator, and so that obviously the town, if it chose to use the second floor, the building would be ADA compliant, and the staircases. There are 2 staircases that are sort of separated by a firewall between the garage and the office. So really, an elevator is mandated here. There are 2 bathrooms in the office side of the partition, men and women, and they'll be upgraded to ADA standards. There's a small kitchen and lounge area, which will be, again, remodeled. And then we will give an allowance for the replacement of the carpet. It's about 11,000 square feet of carpet, and obviously paint the walls, repair the ceiling tiles and tracks as needed. They're in really excellent shape, but there might be a few places where, and we've committed to make sure that it's basically as good as new. And then finally, we have the HVAC system. We have scheduled to be inspected for any evidence of mold or mildew, and then there are a handful of registers throughout the first floor that show a little bit of rust and degradation. So we've said that we will replace those. So the site work's a very interesting part of the project at this point, because remember, if we go back to the beginning when we talked about what we won't have to do now in clearing the 3 acres, we were able to use some of those resources that we would have had to spend there to make the deal with our neighbors for the land to our south. But we'll be installing a new sewer main and connect to the WPCA. We will install a public water main. There'll be some regrading on the west and south, the west being the front of the building, and south parking areas and driveways, improving the stormwater management, and then repave. What's really great, and I know this will come up when I know there's going to be some questions, but I was out there Monday with engineers and with a site contractor. And although the elevation at the valet parking lot is a little bit higher, maybe 3-4 feet, than the lowest part of the south side driveway, there'll be a bit of a cut and fill to raise the grade on the south side for the new garage doors. And as a result, because there's enough space, We don't need a retaining wall because it'll be a very soft grade from the top side, and the stormwater management will be handled. It'll be sort of a valley, so if you can picture, it'll be slightly inclined to the building and slightly inclined to the boundary line. And so the stormwater management and culverts will be down the middle. And it's pretty nice because it alleviates the need for a retaining wall because there's enough room. So we're also going to redesign the office parking and install a breakaway barrier. Where the office transitions to the warehouse currently, it's about a third of the way back in the building. We're going to install a breakaway barrier so that the fire equipment, emergency equipment can circulate the building unimpeded. And but in the interim, we can use it for parking as long as there's a clear way. And we can expand the parking for the office, and I think we can get to 34 spaces between the front of the building and now the side of the building. And then we're going to install a fence, reinstall a fence on the south property line. So we are going to clear, grade, and pave the new entrance and exit area, which includes lighting, stormwater management to the north. Install a gas pump island. The equipment that's currently at Filer Place will be moved. That's part of the moving expenses are part of the budget. It's our responsibility. We'll remove the existing septic tank, which is in the rear of the building. Install the salt shed on the rear parcel that I pointed out, and then create a rear parking lot for the DPW employees. So this is a budget that some of which is fixed, but some of which is still being negotiated. One of the things that's happened here is that we can look at this from an order of magnitude, standard, but until we have construction documents, both engineering-wise for civil site work and architectural, we can't get bids. So we had to go to like very highly reputable, well-known contractors and say, here's the general scope of work. Everything I just pointed out. They walked through the building. They looked at the sort of general over plan for the development, and the numbers, the two numbers that are with the asterisk, are the numbers that we got as budget numbers. We expect those numbers will go down, but it was important that we show that this is well inside the number. Now, it's not so far inside when you realize that the building has to be purchased, but it's to prove to everybody, I think, that all the improvements and betterments that will be required to make this building suitable as not only a town garage, but as an ancillary office space for the town are somewhere, in that vicinity. It's not a $5 million project. It's not a $500,000 project. It's a number that will be honed, but the risk of that number is clearly on the developer. The town doesn't take possession of the building unless they get what they have asked for, and for $2.4 million. So the risk here is not to anybody but to yours truly. I think it's important. There's no part of this project that the town will say, oh, we've got to buy the building. No, if it's not to the standard of what we have negotiated in the contract as a turnkey, then the town's not on the hook for it. So one of the things that came up in talking today when I first arrived, and Melissa yesterday sent me some additional concerns that were raised relative to the amount of space that we will be acquiring on the south part of the building, and whether or not the trucks still have enough or now have enough space to come in and out of the building. We negotiated 25 feet of extra space on the south part of the boundary line, and we did that because we had measured and we knew that we had about 40 feet. It turns out that technically we have 41 feet 6 inches to our property line. But the challenge is that we haven't. The property to our south has been surveyed. The town's property to the north has been surveyed. there hasn't been a survey done of 1160 South Street, so we were relying on Mylars, old Mylars, for the drawing that Mr. Turbot did for us to sort of design the entrance and exit, and that we were working off of, that we had shared with everybody. These were Mylars. They weren't, certified surveys. But we know, because we went out and field measured the pin, where the pins are ourselves, that we knew we had 40 feet. It turns out we had 41 and a half feet. So we asked for 25 in negotiation with our neighbors. We got to 25, so we're at 66 and a half feet to our property line. Speaking yesterday with our engineer, it's pretty clear that since we don't need a retaining wall, and since it'll be a very soft grade, that there's plenty of room for, even with the biggest truck, the one single biggest truck that the town has, with a plow on and the sander, that there's room for that to make the radius turn into the garage. And virtually all the other trucks, it's a non-issue. It's really just one truck that you might be concerned about. But unfortunately, the information that was sent out showed that drawing, for lack of a better word, from a Mylar, and it raised a concern that it wasn't enough space. But we will obviously demonstrate with a hard survey, if we go to contract, if this project is approved going forward, that the space is sufficient to do that. So that was a concern that came up, and and I think that pretty much. I want to introduce David Quisenberry. David, in a package that you received, David had written a letter of professional opinion, which I think is really the root of this meeting tonight. Is that as we left it, that it needed to be demonstrated that the building would be suitable, subject to the improvements and betterments that were required. And David Quisenberry is a well-known architect who has worked on a whole host of things, including DPW garages, and is currently doing one now, as I mentioned. And he wrote a letter of professional opinion, and I'd like to bring him up and ask him to speak to that.
Thank you, Kevin. Is this working? Can you hear me? Okay. So as Kevin mentioned, my name is David Quisenberry. I'm the founding principal of Quisenberry Arcari Malik, which is an architecture firm in Farmington, Connecticut. Actually a coincidence on all of this, we are actually the architect that's doing your town hall renovation project right now. Kevin wasn't even aware of that when he contacted us, and then we just discovered that. But we as a firm, our primary clients are municipalities, and we work for towns, getting towns everything from schools to town halls, public facilities, that kind of thing. So just in terms of so you understand where we're coming from, we will approach this project as a municipal project, and we will look at it as if the town of Suffield were the people that were hiring us, to make sure that in the end, our design, will meet the needs of the town of Suffield. I have an engineering team, that's my engineering team of engineers that will work for me on the project, structural engineers, mechanical engineers, fire protection engineers, that we've worked with on other public facilities. And we will basically be, if we're actually hired, we have yet to be hired for this project. So to this point, we've just been working to help Kevin make this project actually happen, and also with our contact with the town on the town hall project, we understand why this would be a benefit to the town, primarily from the office space point of view, relative to the town hall's space needs. So I guess what I'm saying is that you can rest assured that we're going to do what's needed to be done to this building to make sure that it's a good building and that it functions properly as it should. Kevin has tried to do his diligence and find all the things that he knows that are wrong with the building. But further to that, if we get started on the project, one of the first things we'll do is go through and truly inspect the building with my full engineering team and make sure that we uncover any problems, any issues, potential code issues, anything like that. Obviously we need to study where we put the elevator, how we reconfigure that. Hopefully that will be a collaborative process with the people from the town and the end user, so that we don't essentially just say, here it is, take it or leave it. We'd like to work with you to make sure that we deliver you a project that you're happy that you've purchased and that it suits your needs. So, and as Kevin said, this is what we do. And so again, I hope you can understand that we're coming at it well. In the end, we would be hired by Kevin for this particular project. Our interests would be aligned with your interests.
Thank you both for that update. At this time, I'd like to ask the three boards to take their positions up on the stage, and we can then have further discussion and ask questions of the experts here. Dave, I think we all agree that when you're working on the town hall, we don't want to sit on a stage. Okay, thank you. Okay. About a week ago, I think I sent some information to everyone. We've just heard that there have been a few updates to that information, which you've seen. As Mr. Casey discussed, we are here to decide whether or not we are satisfied as Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance that we've received a suitable opinion that the as renovated building would be suitable as a highway garage. One of the things that we requested, both boards requested that it be an opinion of a certified engineer. We had a conference call with one of our two engineers that worked on this, who basically told us that the correct professional to render that opinion would be the architect because of the need for conceptual designs, et cetera, and who that architect would be working with their engineers. And so that's one of the little technicalities that we'll have to go through. And Attorney Donnelly is here to kind of make sure that we cover all the points that we would need to do should we decide to move forward with the project, to make sure that we are properly authorized, especially if we decide to issue a bond to cover the charges. And so I'd just like to open it up at this time to ask questions of Mr. Casey and Mr. Quisenberry. In no order, any order, anyone just.
No, I have, I'm not sure my questions are for Mr. Casey or Quisenberry, but I keep hearing about the getting the trucks into the garage, and I'm an accountant, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a construction person, and I'd like to defer to people who have that capability to tell me whether or not that's going to be workable. And that's a major thing. If we can't get those trucks in and out of there, and if that property next door isn't enough that that they're going to be buying to try to make that work, I want to know that before we run off with this stuff somewhere and try to send it to a town meeting and find out that things don't work. So, Kevin, I think you did a little work on that.
Worse yet, if you buy the building and then you find it doesn't work.
What's that?
Worse yet, if you would buy the building and then you find it doesn't work.
Yeah, you better speak into that mic.
Yeah. So I think Mr. Casey did address that, but perhaps it needs to be clarified once again. But Kevin, did you have?
Yeah, so the basis of the question is really derived from the information that you had given us a week ago.
Yes.
Which apparently is not accurate.
Right, as he mentioned.
So the question was, can we make the turn as the trucks are pulling out of the garage? Can you make the turn before you end up in the executive valet parking property to get the truck safely in and out of the garage? From what I understand, the trucks are going to drive in and they're going to back out. So the turning radius, especially during that backing out phase, was important to us. And with the math that was provided to us earlier, it was pretty clear that it didn't work. New information tonight says that there may be more room than was on the documents. So my concern is, how do we have a conversation tonight if the information that we got a week ago to observe and to study and to ask these questions tonight, how do we trust any of that information if one of the most basic things turns out not to be accurate? I have a hard time supporting the project if we're dealing with information that's not accurate. So that's the first thing. And I understand we can't go ahead and do the full drawings and,
Right.
and everything to get to this point. But we have to have something that we can trust here.
Well, I would defer to Mr. Quisenberry to tell us if we can trust what he's representing today. And I think that one thing you should know is that the deal that allowed Mr. Casey to acquire the additional information really just went through probably around the same time as we got this information. So it's this deal has been very fluid, as you know. There's been a lot of moving parts.
I guess my feeling is we may be rushing
Sure.
ahead of time.
Yeah.
That we may not be ready to.
Okay, and that's for
To
these
push
boards
things
to
forward.
decide.
Yeah.
But I would defer to Mr. Casey and Mr. Quisenberry to please speak to that.
I would just say that,
In the microphone, please.
there's no mic here.
It's right in front of you. No, it's right there. Handheld.
Yeah, so, as I explained, we were giving the information to the town as best we had it, which was coming off of Mylar, and we realized that as it wasn't sufficient to do it. So we went to the neighbor, made a deal to acquire 25 extra feet. Now know that it's 66 feet and 6 inches. The radius that you referred to, I believe, is 56 feet plus. So we clearly have an excess of almost 10 feet. But there's one other thing. Part of the plan and zoning, part of the tri-party agreement that we reached was that the seller of the acreage to us is going to get 3 additional acres in the back on which to park cars. So if we don't do this deal, if we don't do the deal with them, they're not getting anything from us. So we feel pretty comfortable in terms of leverage that if we need 5 more feet, we can certainly either give them some of the property that we're getting from the salt shed to pick up a handful of parking spaces if they feel the value is necessitated, or that since they're getting twice as much parking space as they're giving up, that they're probably going to want to work with the town, and that 25-foot limit is, it's part of an agreement, but I feel it's pretty negotiable if it was necessary. Now, you could say, well, the whole deal rides on that. Well, I think we've come so far with this deal with so much diligence, and I don't think there's many other things that have been. This could be like a critical go, no go if the trucks can't get in there, to Mr. Reynolds' point, but I don't think that's the question at all. I think that with 66.5 feet, that the largest single truck, and there's only one of them, still fits inside and I'll let Mr. Quisenberry talk about that. But to me, it's a bit of a red herring because we know we now have 66 feet. We didn't know that when you were given that information, and we know it now.
And
So we know that we don't have to do any more horse trading to get any more feet there.
Right, we don't. We have 66.5 feet.
How many was that, did you use, Kevin?
The original information that was given to us was 30 feet from the building to the property line with an additional 25 added to that.
that's
So
like
it was
55.
55.
Okay.
The truck is 40 feet long with a 42-foot radius.
But he said 3 times that it was really 41 and,
I
yeah,
understand.
plus the 20, right.
That's what we found out later.
Right.
The concern came up because
Right.
of bad information.
So are you comfortable that?
So I can move on beyond that, but I would say that it requires somebody to demonstrate on paper that turning radius works.
So the 66 would work
Maybe.
with the way.
I haven't done the work.
Maybe,
Okay. Yeah, maybe, because we have to consider the swing of the plow and everything else.
And I'm Marty Page, I'm an alternate on the Permanent Building Commission, also a licensed engineer. Kevin, you brought up the idea that you were going to build this swale to allow the drainage to go through. 42 feet that Kevin is talking about is the front bumper of something, which would be a normal truck, not a truck with a plow, not with something that's hanging low, not something that's going to hit the bottom of this swale. So just be aware, 66 might not be enough. It might need to be 42 to the root of the swale, and then the swale goes up. So your point is well taken, and you might have to do some horse trading to accommodate extra land. But we do not want to be too blocked with the idea that you have one truck. You have one truck now. Might be 2 trucks next year. Might be 5 trucks 10 years from now. So this is a 50-year building. Well, let's prepare for a 50-year building.
Absolutely right, and we certainly have to, when we get the survey done, when we know whether or not there's going to be a deal here, a project, we will then turn loose the professionals, and they will have to design the project in a way that's satisfactory to the town, or the town doesn't buy the building. I mean, that's a big factor here. So that's the how do I say it? That's nobody's buying the building if the town approves it at a town meeting and it's authorized to do it. And if that's the case, they're not buying the building, we got to make it right, or we stuck with the building and the $2 million of improvements. So I think that the greatest comfort you could get is the fact that ultimately, if it's not sufficient from an engineering point of view, then you're not taking the building.
Understood.
I mean, that was essentially what I was going to say, was that in my testimony earlier, I was explaining that if we're actually hired to design this facility, we're going to then get into every little piece of this facility and design it and show everything so that we can demonstrate to the entire town of Suffield that this facility works for your needs. So I totally agree with your concerns. And in the beginning of the project, as you know, we were looking at all these ways to back trucks in through the back door, and we kept saying, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And we were demonstrating to Kevin that it did work. So that's why it then went this other direction. And so all I can say to you is that if the project, if you authorize the project to move forward, and then he hires my engineering team, and then we get an actual civil engineer on the project as well, which is what's needed to determine the swale and the topography and edge of pavement dimensions and all of those very detailed things, which are very important. The point is there will be a professional team in place to assess those things, and we won't be measuring Mylars and putting paper trucks onto drawings and things like that to try to determine if this will work. Is we'll have people that are hired to do this as their profession, establish and demonstrate to you that the project works. And as Kevin mentioned, if we can't demonstrate to you that the project works at that point, you're not on the hook for anything.
Will that work be done before or after the proposal is brought before the town at a town meeting or a referendum? Because if people are unsure of what's going to happen, they're not going to vote for it.
Right.
So what's the timetable on getting that work done? if you follow my question.
Tim, I would respectfully disagree because I think to Dave's point just now.
I'm just asking a question, I'm not.
Yeah, no, but my point to you is I think it has to be decided whether or not the project's going to go forward for the amount of, the amount of money and resources have already been expended, over the last year is pretty significant. But to go to the professional level of the drawings level, which these gentlemen know, is, you do that when you know you have a project. And I think to Dave's point, I think it can stand the test of a town meeting if it's explained to people that the town doesn't buy it if the town's not happy with if the trucks don't fit in the driveway. I think it's as simple as that.
But just keep in mind, the townspeople, if they feel uncomfortable or not secure in the building working, they're probably not going to vote for us. So
So I guess what I would say is, let's say a town meeting is scheduled. I think what I'll do is what Kevin did, and we'll like tomorrow, in the next day or so, we'll have a local engineer. So far, I've used Russo for the in East Windsor for the sort of preliminary civil engineering work. But I'll have them in time for the town meeting, so that if I stand up there and make a presentation to the town meeting, I'll say, this is the radius that's required. This is the space that we have. We're not going to go beyond. We're not going to go into full drawings, but to the points that were just made, we're going to have to, I guess, represent that it's not only doable, but that it works. And I wouldn't relish the thought of going in front of a town meeting saying, it's like we're keeping our fingers crossed here. I think we have to get some sort of documentation short of full design plans, and I can say we can do that because I think it's probably pretty textbook stuff. What is the radius for a 42-foot truck? To Kevin's point, I think.
On several occasions, it's been mentioned that if we're not satisfied with the building, we can walk away. How's that spelled out? What kind of contract do we have, or do we have something in place now? We can't go to a town meeting saying that if we don't like the building, we're going to walk away. You're going to put a lot of money into this. So why? There's got to be some kind of contract and some kind of stipulations there.
Well, you're right. I am going to spend a lot of money and resources to do this, including buying the building, which is probably the biggest of all. We're operating under a memo of understanding right now, non-binding, which spelled out all of these general terms. That's given me the comfort to go as far as I've gone to date. I think the contracts would be negotiated after the town meeting, but before any expenditure, by anybody. Forget bonding and all that stuff. That's next year. By the time the project's all done and the town were to take title to it. But as far as the risk is clearly on the developer, and and I think that's something that maybe the town attorney will say how that would work.
Yeah.
Have we seen the MOU?
So I'll explain how we got to the point we're at. In the context of due diligence, I've had all those information sessions. We've listened to the feedback. We've walked people through the buildings, gotten more feedback. Well, every time a question has come up, Mr. Casey has had to spend money to get things done. And so there is a non-binding MOU that was put together that is basically it's a memorandum of understanding is clearly what it is. That our understanding is if we continue going through this process and doing this due diligence and it is brought to these boards for approval, which we are going through that process, and then to a town meeting for approval, that we will then enter a contract. So until I receive, the town and me as the authorized person receives the approvals of the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the town meeting, I can't enter a contract with him because I have no authority to do so. So it's a process that evolves. But anything else to add?
Is there any commitment on our part financially at this point?
No. The Board of Finance has given, a due diligence purse, and we've spent a few $1,000s on those engineers that we've discussed. But yes, we're not obligated to do anything. Derek, do you want to add anything?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
You better use the mic.
I'll just talk loud. So generally what we've always done, and a few times the town town meeting. After it's been approved at town meeting, we've negotiated and entered into a contract that includes certain due diligence provisions like you would in any contract for real estate. So there's an inspection period, there's various contingencies put in place to protect both buyer and seller. Okay? Once all of those contingencies are met, the closing date is laid out according to certain terms, and the deal would close. Just like similar to any residential or commercial purchase you may have been involved in individually.
And
We have not negotiated any contract. We have not discussed preliminary terms for any contract. None of that takes place until after approval at a town meeting.
so we get approval at town meeting, and then everything Kevin just walked through on the slides would be the contingencies that are all laid out in the contract.
Yes.
Yeah. I have one question. Is the price point different at this? I know his price point was for the modification of the building, but is the total price point different than what
No.
okay.
No, it's
I
not.
didn't think so. I just
And
wondered.
that's an important point. He is assuming the risk here. We are going to get, the contract will state exactly what we think we're getting, and it will be clear, and we will be hiring professionals to make sure that the scope of work is very clear. If he has to go do whatever to achieve that scope, the risk is on him. And when he is ready to deliver the building to the town of Suffield, we will hire an inspector, just like you would if you were purchasing a house, that's going to go through and find any deficiencies, codes. The good news is we have our own built-in inspector, and then we will hire another third party. So we will be very well represented, and if things are not fixed to our satisfaction, we don't have to buy the building, and we walk away. Yes.
What would the timing of that be? Let's say all of this money is spent, the building is up to speed, we're happy, up until that closing day, and then we find out that some other issue comes up that nobody's thought about. Do we still have the existing town garage to fall back on?
Yes.
Or is that gone by that
Nope,
time?
we have it.
So when does that garage go away?
It goes away when we purchase the building and all of those contingencies are satisfied.
So-
We are limiting our risk. We just walk away and we continue in Filer Place, operating business as usual.
Can I change, can I just ask?
Yeah,
A little
please.
different. Yep.
In the interest of candor, Brian asked about the price. The price has not changed. When we were negotiating with our neighbors to make the purchase of the additional property, I was able to negotiate with the seller of the property and with the town, but not to raise the price that I would sell to the town, but only that there may be certain items that were included. We haven't gotten there yet. We haven't talked about what they are. It's a relatively small amount, but I think in the interest of candor, it's a somewhat tiny bit fluid because there may be a few things that we say you were going to get $4 a square yard allowance for carpeting. I'm proposing $3 because we had to pay this extra money. And in the course of negotiations, and I don't think realistically you can negotiate completely in public. Sorry.
We also have a pretty healthy contingency built in that, where these types of things, would come from. And so, yep, I think.
No,
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, yes.
My question basically has to do with how we define we're satisfied with the building. And again, talking about getting the trucks in and backing them out past those pillars. If it's doable but cumbersome, I wouldn't like that. But if it's doable, does that mean we would have to accept it?
The documents will be drafted in a way, and we will be represented by construction counsel. We're not just going to use any counsel. We're going to use someone who has experience, as we did in some of the other projects that we've been working on, to make sure that the scope of work is clear, and that we're not just going to make something that we can get by using. It has to be suitable for our needs, or we're not going to purchase it. That's been made very clear by these boards to Mr. Casey.
Dr. Huntington, I would say that the columns that you refer to, there are 5 of them. There are going to be 8 double-stacked bays, but there won't be any turning. So the bays, the columns are 40 feet apart. The closest one to any one of the individual bays might be 10 feet protected by bollards. So I don't think that that's, because there's no turning now, it's just in and out of the building. I don't think that the columns pose any kind of an issue in terms of cumbersome, the way we've reconfigured.
Both the columns and backing out through those doors and turning.
Yeah, well,
I
they
just want
back
it to be easy.
Right, and I think the DPW guys, I appreciate that. I think the DPW guys would probably tell you that they back in and out now, although maybe not the second bay, obviously, but there's a lot of ways to do this, and I guess they'd better know how they want to exactly utilize the space. They may want to back the back trucks in and drive them out. I don't know, but it's certainly, according to somebody who has designed a number of these buildings, it's certainly suitable in the sense that there's no flow anymore. It's just the garage doors, the garage bays. So I think that, yeah.
Just changing the topic a little bit, I was there at the building yesterday, and I was exiting over by the intended entry and exit. I looked to my left, saw plenty of time to pull out. I pulled out into the lane in my car and looked in my mirror, and there was a car right behind me. It kind of startled me that he was so close to me. I thought I had plenty of room to pull out, and I thought, geez, what would it be like if I were in a school bus or a fire truck that had just fueled up in this location? So the next time I was coming back into town, I actually picked the point of the end of the sight line where the road curves at the bottom of the hill. And I actually timed myself at 40 miles an hour, and I found that I had just over 5 seconds from that point to the driveway. Do we have any information that would tell us how long it takes a truck to make that turn and get up to speed?
Well, I don't have that information. I have to come back to the fact that road was designed by the town of Suffield to utilize for industrial use for trucks at that point of entry. So we're not inventing anything here with DPW trucks pulling in, putting out. They're not as big as tractor trailers.
We're also going to have school buses.
Yeah, but I understand.
Yeah.
School buses not full of kids.
No, but it's a school bus.
Well, but it's the same as a truck or a tractor trailer truck or anything else, right?
I'm just saying
So if Amazon, and I'm asking this because you asked a question, I'm trying to get my hands on it. If Amazon builds a series of a campus back there on the 21 acres, which is the greatest thing in the world, or another Windsor marketing group comes, and there are 40 trucks a day coming in and out of that pre-designed driveway, is the same. I mean, are we going to preclude those people from coming there?
They'd redesign the roadway to have an acceleration lane.
Okay, but the presumption is that they designed the driveway for the use of that space.
Is that a good presumption?
Well, I asked Mr. Turbot. He's right here.
If I could cut to the chase, I do think Jerry and Bill might be able to speak to this. When they bought the
Derek, speaking to a microphone, please.
When the town sold the facility that's there currently next door, I believe a requirement was a traffic study with the state before that was built. Isn't that right, Jerry? Because that was one of the contingencies in the contract.
Well, I think they have to show that they have.
Jerry, please use the mic. This meeting is being recorded, and we're driving Lisa crazy up there. Thank you.
Yeah, I think when we look at a driveway entrance to a road like that, we make sure that they show that there's adequate sight distance in each location or in each direction for the traffic and for the intended speed. And there's actually a formula used. Usually it's 10 miles above the posted speed limit that they have to actually calculate the stopping distance and make sure they have sight distance in either direction that meets or exceeds that. That's normally what's used in planning and zoning reviews.
So what would happen to that particular sight line, or when would we know, in a study be done, if we add those extra parking spots for the office space and people begin to use the entry or the exit that's closer to the end of the sight line? Your time is going to be compressed.
Well, the sight line for that, for that site. In other words, the two entrances there, the entrance and the exit for that. I mean, that would be looked at on that, but that's an existing facility, and that does make a difference versus a new facility.
We're going to have increased traffic through there, both office traffic and then truck traffic, and that's why, just my own personal experience, and that's why I'm asking if it's been thought about.
I think it's a very good point, Kevin, and I think it would be it would make a lot of sense to put a traffic study contingency into the contract.
Okay.
And I think when we talk about the types of due diligence that can be done, it's pretty expansive on our end, and it probably makes sense to include that as a contingency in the contract.
Okay, last question, and then
Can I just add one more question on that? When that building, 1160, was operating, what was it doing, and did it have employees, and how did they deal with this issue? Because this is an existing building, so how did it work?
I was going to say that it was a Panalpina active office building, both floors, and a freight and an ongoing freight warehouse. So the building and the driveways, which are not as good as the one we're going to use, while maybe they weren't optimal, they were certainly in use. And I think the point of the fact is that the building is existing, and we're making an improvement to that by going to a driveway that was designed presumably for increased traffic. So you're right, there's going to be more traffic. I mean, I could envision trucks entering right. There's all kinds of things that they do in general when things are going on like that, but you don't stop Windsor marketing from coming because they're going to pull out onto the road. I mean, it's part of what gets factored into the whole project. Really.
yeah, being a 4-lane highway now might not have been when that building was put in, so that makes a difference. So one last question, and then I'll let others.
One thing I did want to say is that with this building, actually, this is going to have to go through site plan review of zoning and planning. In fact, it probably has to go through the Conservation Commission if there are paving or different changes in the soils around it. And that would also, traffic study or a look at traffic would be part of that review also. I will say that when that building was built, that definitely was a 2-lane road. That was expanded, I remember, in the late 80s to a 4-lane road.
Yeah. And we are changing the use of the building as well.
Right.
The use group.
Jerry, am I correct in believing that you require Connecticut DOT approval when you change the use of a building, the driveways? I know I had to go through that with Sacred Heart Church when we built it.
Kevin, to your point, we're changing the use of the building, but it's more benign than trucks going in, tractor-trailer trucks going in and out, really at any hour, day or night.
I guess my point, Kevin, is not that it's more or less benign. It's just that it's going to trigger certain events that we have to respond to. So there's certain things that we think we're getting based on your presentation in the building. And if we get all of that for the price, then I think the town is probably going to be pretty satisfied. The documents that we were given to study back up your price of the building with a budget.
Disagree.
And some of those line items say that the cost of certain things are by the owner. But I don't see anything I don't see the fiber optic to the building included, either paid for by you or by the town. I don't see, there's a lot of significant items that are kind of left out of the.
No, the sewer's
Well, the sewer was included tonight, but it wasn't in the original document. But
It's part of the site work. The
It
sewer's part of the site work.
was in there. Melissa, to speak to your point about contingencies, we got 2 packages, and we had a construction cost previous that had contingent of $1.14 million. We got a package tonight that it miraculously went down to $1 million, which is about the contingencies. So there is no contingency.
No, it's a
or the
10%,
money's
there's
moved somewhere else.
10% contingency as opposed to 20%. It's in the last line item.
Could I ask a question of a different nature? When this was proposed, it was also with Filer Place. What's the relationship? Is there an agreement that if we go ahead with the building on South Street, that you get the land and you get the property on Filer Place, is that?
Yes, I've probably said this about a dozen times at meetings. I'll say it again tonight. When I first approached the first selectman, and no, I guess it was Melissa was the first selectman when I first approached it. I said, I want to develop Filer Place. I have a great idea for it. How do I do that on the town land? She said, find a place for our garage. So I said, okay. And as I put the package together, I said, the cost of doing this, if you look at the budget.
So my point, I'm going to interrupt you because I understand what you're saying, but really the cost of this project is whatever this building's plus. We're giving you a valuable piece of property, so that adds to the value of this.
No.
Is there a written agreement here for that?
Okay, so
Yeah,
let me
between
interrupt for 1 minute. We've already discussed this whole deal ad nauseum, and we've already acted as boards on this whole deal, the complexity that you're discussing, where we know that there is a land swap where the developer is taking the highway garage subject to its environmental cleanup liability, that we are funding it through the tax increment financing district agreement in the Town Center Village District that we put in place a few years ago for this very specific purpose. So those complexities of this deal have already been brought to these boards, and the approvals that we have were that if we were able to receive an opinion that after renovating this 1160 South Street, we would have a facility that is suitable to serve as a highway garage, that the town would be authorized to move forward to go to the next step, which would be entering that specific contract that all of you are looking for. And that specific contract, the town will be represented by construction lawyers who will make sure that all of these things like fiber optics, et cetera, in our expectations of the scope of work are very well detailed. And so until we are clear with that and we're represented by professionals, we aren't going to sign that contract.
So
but I need to be, I'm sorry. Yes.
I'm just saying, when we go to town meeting then
Yes.
to vote on this, we're also agreeing that the town's
Yes.
also agreeing on Filer Place.
Correct. The entire deal. But again, the Filer Place piece is the very last thing that will happen if we are satisfied that what the product that he delivered is satisfactory to the inspectors that we hire to represent the town.
But-
So he's taking the risk.
So I'm just asking, when we go to town meeting then?
Yes.
Will they be voting, will the town vote not only on this building, but we're also voting on Filer Place?
Yes, and that was in the agenda that you were circulated. There's a proposed call of a town meeting that has all of those steps in
And
it.
is it one, or is it, are they independent, or are
Yeah,
they
no.
together?
No, it would be one
Together. That's-
entire.
Dr.
That's
Chaffetz?
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Chaffetz, out of respect, I want to say that I should have made this clear. If there's a town meeting called and I make a presentation, the presentation will be more comprehensive than tonight, because tonight's presentation was, I was told, was about the suitability of the building.
Yes.
At the town meeting, it'll be a much bigger, more comprehensive look at the whole in toto.
We will, so again, we've had lots of meetings to get to the point that we're at. We keep pushing the needle on the due diligence piece. The town meeting will be starting from the very beginning, and we will be explaining every single detail of this complicated transaction. And I'm hoping that people have followed along over the months and months. And so that's where we're going.
I just have a
Melissa.
couple of structural questions. One, is there any asbestos or PCBs in the building? Given
No,
our
we have a phase one that we provided that shows no contamination, no
Okay.
elements. That said, there was sort of a topical discovery of where there had been some drywall in the garage part of the back of the building. There's a very limited amount of glue where the drywall was removed from probably 20 feet and only in strips. And we were advised that we should look at that, and we would have to remove it, but that'd be part of our.
The only other question, I didn't see the cost for the doors and the structure above it.
Yep.
to support-
So it's what you received today. It's been updated to the correct square footage for the 8 door. It's done not by 8. It's done by the total square footage of the doors, and it's in.
So do we have a total cost, if the building is 2.4 million, what are the owner costs on top of that?
The only owner cost at this point is to pave the extension of the road that's already continuing that the town has, and we can do that with pavement management, and that was estimate, I think we had an estimate for over about 100,000. So that's in the regular budget. We have some economic development money that we can use because we're making our parcel on Lot 3 more accessible. And so that's the only other owner's cost.
It doesn't really matter where the money's coming from. I'm more concerned about the things that are left to the owner's cost that are expressed in the budget, not in
And
the
what are they?
narrative.
What are the specific things that are owner's costs?
Connection to gas, connection to sewer, connection to telephone, connection to security, permanent utilities.
There's no mention of the fiber.
The engineering for those are specifically omitted from the engineering budgets.
Okay.
Any contaminated waste
Mr.
removal.
Quisenberry's sub-consultants. So the numbers are going to go up.
Okay.
And where does that come from? That's
The contract is not negotiated yet.
Yeah.
This is a
agreed.
very,
I'm
this is a,
throwing it on
yes,
the
yes,
table.
no, absolutely, absolutely.
It may be minutia,
This
but
budget
it's
is a very
important.
preliminary budget that was prepared by the developer. If we get authorized to move forward, we're going to negotiate those things, and we are not going to pay a penny more than $2.4 million in the land swap.
That's what I was going to say. So from a
Yes.
Board of Finance standpoint,
Yeah.
it's 2.4 million, whether it's money that we're paying him because he's done all the work, or money we spend on our own. It's 2.4, and that's
Correct.
So
I
it is-
actually think it's 2.5 because we have the 100,000 that we're doing
Correct.
for the road. Even if you want to call it economic development, we're doing it because
Absolutely.
of this project. So
Absolutely.
it's
That is
2.5 million.
absolutely. So it's
But
another
we've only
100,000.
approved- But we've only approved 2.4 million,
You've approved $2.4 million.
not 2.5.
correct. Yeah, but we.
However-
But the 100,000 was going to come out of pavement management.
Yes.
No, that was never discussed, and this is a new cost
Yes,
that
it was.
layered on later.
No, it was discussed.
It was discussed.
It was discussed.
Yeah.
They said that when they said we were going to do the road, they said that would be coming from pavement management.
Yes.
That was discussed. Now, it's
So-
still, if we want to
So
say.
it's still a
that-
$2.5 million
Yeah.
project, isn't it coming out of the town's budget?
But the
So-
purchase-
So the town is voting to spend $2.5 million.
And we will make that clear, but the purchase price for what Mr. Casey is doing is 2.4.
Can I ask us some new questions? And
Please do.
Go a different, Mr. Quisenberry, out of interest, how many garages have you done for municipalities, new construction, over the last 10 years? And what municipality was that for?
Please use the microphone. It's right on the podium.
New construction, we've done one for the town of Cromwell. It's currently under construction right now.
And what is the expected cost per square foot?
Square foot.
What's the expected cost? And how many square feet is it and how many
It's
bays?
significantly bigger than this, and I think the total project cost is around $6 million.
Okay, so if we were to try to build an 8-bay new garage, so we're not having to worry about replacing roofs and structural issues, et cetera, and just started fresh, what would be an estimated cost for a
I would think
reasonable
you'd be-
garage without offices, other
I
than
would think you'd be
basic
at
office?
about $4 million, around $4 million.
And how do you come with that figure?
Just simply because that's smaller than what we're doing in Cromwell.
But
I'm just simply saying that your program is smaller
Mm-hmm.
than what they're doing in Cromwell, so I'm simply just saying that it'd probably be around $4 million.
So what is the Cromwell? What I'm trying to do is figure out, we've never had a very clear understanding of whether we should be building new or renovating a 40-year-old building. The only new property that's been proposed to us was going to be a $3.2 million, I think. Was that the number, Kev?
Well, higher. Yeah, it was higher.
3.4. And that was on a property that we weren't going to own, and it was going to be a land lease. If we were to do a project on a property that we were going to own with 3.4 million versus 2.4, is that something that we should be considering as a town instead of renovating an existing property?
And you certainly could consider that. I don't know that you have land.
We've got a lot of land. We actually have a fire station with 3.5 acres. We also have land over on Betty Lane. We've got about 12 acres over there.
Okay, I mean, that's
And if we go around, we're going around in circles because we had the town planner present all of those options very
Yeah, and I
early
don't
on in
think-
this
I don't think
process.
they were fully vetted. I hate to say it. I'd love to have the town planner speak again on that, because I still think that we have not considered building new to the appropriate degree.
So I want to turn this over to the town attorney to remind us about the process and the procedures that we've taken, because that ship has sailed. I mean, at least.
It hasn't sailed, because I think the town needs to understand what the expenses are and what our options are. We've only
Understood.
been presented this option. We have not been presented a build-new option except on a parcel where we were going to have a land lease.
It was a lease to own.
Which is a very different project.
Right? It wasn't a lease to own?
So
No.
let me just
It was
interject.
never leased to own.
Well, it was a
Let me
very
interject
long-term
for a
lease that was
moment.
de facto
Because the
ownership.
idea was it was going to be a 20-year lease with options for renewal every 5 years, and it was the expectation that the seller was never going to make a commitment to sell.
But then we had a right of first refusal that if they ever decided to sell the land, we would purchase it.
But
Yes.
let me
Okay, but-
interject for a second, because the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen have already both approved this at separate meetings. You've approved all of the same resolutions to this point. The one outstanding question to the resolutions that you've already approved is, we need an engineering report. Everything was contingent on the engineering report.
Did we approve bonding?
No.
No,
No.
Did
bonding
we
has,
approve a way to finance it?
bonding has not been approved, correct?
So we haven't discussed how we're going to finance it.
And that's
Correct.
on the agenda for this evening, should we get to that point.
But as far as the approvals of the project, both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance have already approved it. So if the question really before you on the agenda is, does the architect's report tonight satisfy the contingency that you put into place?
Is that this one-page letter?
I haven't seen it. I don't.
I
have
wouldn't
it.
call that a
Yes.
report. I'd call it an opinion.
Right. It was certified. It was the actual language was based on the. I don't have the exact language in front of me actually, but it was subject to an engineer's opinion. So you have an architect's opinion.
It's contingent on receiving a certified engineering report
There
that
you go.
1160 South Street is suitable for use as a town garage.
And I think we got an engineer that said they couldn't make that decision, and said, and then we've and so that would be an architect. That's what, Melissa, you're talking about
Yes,
before. We
right.
kind of, and we've got an architect's opinion saying, if you do the things that have been, we saw the presentation for, it would be suitable. That's the way I read this.
Yes.
And I'm very interested in, I'm curious as to the Permanent Building Commission's opinion. I mean, they're professionals. I mean, I'm an accountant. I'm not an engineer. So based on what they've heard, does that make sense to them? or not?
A registered design professional, being an engineer, being an architect, they could make that, my opinion, they could make that call, one or
Right.
the other, because they're going to have to work collaboratively to finish. If Mr. Quisenberry did it and said that, I would say that's just as satisfactory as if Rich Suzak did the same thing. That's registered design professional.
So then we've fulfilled that contingency.
That's for us to decide here.
Yeah,
Have we
Yeah.
fulfilled?
So, wait, wait.
Yeah.
So again, if you look at your agenda, in order for that contingency to be satisfied, according to bond counsel, you need to vote to approve it. So if the Board of Finance, it was your contingency, if you accept that this has fulfilled that contingency, it moves forward to the Board of Selectmen. And then the Board of Selectmen need to vote to approve that contingency. So
Unless the dollar amount's different, which I think Chris's point before, I mean, we approved 2.4 subject to this. Do we as a board say, hey, it's really 2.5 subject to this? If that's, I mean, I'm fine if we need to take a vote on the 2.5, if we need to adjust for that.
Absolutely, and on the agenda, we added a consider and approve additional motions to allow the boards to consider other things that may have come up since then. So certainly, if you felt that needed to be amended, it would need to be amended on both.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris's point is fair that, you know, if we go to the town and say, hey, it's 2.4, but then, in a future ACE budget, we're going to get $100,000 we're going to take from pavement management, and we budget that, and that's going to go towards this. I think we want to be transparent and say, if that's the true cost, we wouldn't have done that road, that $100,000 we would spend, we wouldn't do it for future other development. If the answer is, yes, that's in the plan, we would eventually do that road, forget a town garage there, well, then I would argue, okay, we keep it out. But if the answer is no, we're going to do that road only because of this, then let's put it in.
So to that point, either, Bill, you can speak to this or I can. Economic development of that PAC parcel was going to require that at some point we invest in making them accessibility to make it more marketable. Would we have done it right now? Probably not. At some point, would we have looked at doing it? Probably we would have. So that's one piece there. I want to be clear, though, if we do make any additional motions, that we are not purchasing 1160 for $2.4 million. I don't want it to be perceived that we're going to give you another 100,000. That 100,000 is specifically for this other piece.
Right,
and so
right.
very clear that that's what we're doing here.
Could I just, out of respect, answer Mr. Childs? I expect that there would be vigorous debate at a town meeting about to the points you may have raised.
I do too.
Well, we believe, that's fine. Let's get it on. We believe that we have the most suitable solution for a town garage for the benefit of the town of Suffield when you factor in everything that we've talked about tonight. Some will disagree, but I don't think that was, we didn't come here tonight prepared to, we've had that discussion previously at Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen and Planning and Zoning every step of the way. We've had that, we've been moved forward by your votes. So we believe that the town meeting will ultimately, the merits will ultimately be in front of, the people.
Can I ask another question, Melissa? Where are we with animal control and dog pounds? And because that's over on that property right now. Is that going to be part of this project, or is that?
No, we are negotiating with.
We've been negotiating for about a year, right?
Yes, it hasn't been the largest priority because we know that we have plenty of time to get that deal done. We have a willing partner on the other side in River Valley Animal Facility.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about having that building torn down?
No.
Okay,
no.
Good.
Are we going to have to bring the network down to this building?
Kevin, where'd he go? Kevin, can you speak to that?
Are we going to have to wire it for the town so they're all in the same system?
The IT information.
I think as we looked at it, it's dark. Is it called dark web?
Yes.
There's high speed. We call it high speed internet available to the building, and you rent the trunk lines, and you have to decide whether or not you want to buy them. It's not included in the budget.
Yeah, and
It's not in the budget.
it would be an operating expense.
It's an operating expense.
We consulted with our IT director, and she doesn't necessarily recommend that we buy our own. She would recommend that we put it as an operating expense to rent this dark fiber, which is beyond my ability to speak to any further than that. But it would be an operating expense, and something that we would keep an eye on and perhaps invest in the future if we found that renting it for whatever reason wasn't sufficient.
Jerry mentioned that that the project would have to now go back through planning and zoning and conservation.
Yes.
Don't we need to wait for that?
Well, no, because
Isn't
he
that
won't
the
be
usual order?
unless we move forward and authorize us to move forward to get a contract where he would be at the next step where he could go get those plans that then need to go to planning and zoning. I think one of the things that we're having a hard time understanding is that this is a different way to do a project than we've done in the past. We're buying a turnkey project here. So we just have to get to the point where we say, developer, if you go do what we've asked you to do, go purchase all the plans you need to do and hire your own experts working for you that we're not on the hook for. You go through our planning and zoning and our conservation and you satisfy their every whim, as you've done with all these boards here. At the end of the day, you're going to give us a building. We're going to have our own inspector inspect it. And if we think that you have done everything we've asked and that this building is suitable for us, we're going to pay you. And unless all of those things happen in all of these different reviews, we're not purchasing this building. And if we don't purchase the building, he doesn't get Filer Place, and we are just in the same place we've been in. So that is the intent of this project, that the risk is 100% on the developer.
So Melissa,
Yes.
on that topic of inspector,
Yep.
at the end of the renovation work,
Yes.
exactly who from the town? Is it from someone from the town who inspects? Is it who's going to inspect the work?
We will hire a professional to do it. And who that professional is, I will rely on the PBC to tell me who I should go hire, whether it be another engineer, as we've used to get to the point that we're at now, or another architect, or whoever that person is who is qualified to go through and make sure that we are getting what we get, just like you do when you buy a house.
So it's going to be the building commission that decides who that inspector is?
I'm certainly not going to pick them. My guess would be we would put out an RFP based on what the building officials, the permit building committee tells us we need. You know, we'll follow our bid and purchase policy, and we will get a very qualified professional to certify to us that we should purchase this building. I'm certainly not making that decision.
I think this is very important because this is the alignment of interest, and
Yes.
there's been a little. I'm a little bit confused by that that alignment of interest, and we want to make sure that this building and any inspection is done by a group that we're paying for.
Of course.
So that's probably some more money that we have to consider.
Well, you've already given me that money. You've already given me a $50,000 budget to do just those types of things.
Good.
And we've already hired 2 certified engineers to examine this building. And then those certified engineers met with Mr. Casey's certified engineer. They figured out all these things, and that's why we've been having all of this due diligence to get to this point, all of these meetings to inform you of what we've done to get to this point. Now we're at the point where, in order to justify the town spending the money to hire a construction attorney to really draft these documents, this contract that we would be relying on to do this project, I need you to authorize me to do that. And I can't do it unless you tell me that you're satisfied that this opinion from Mr. Quisenberry is sufficient that if we do everything that we're saying that we're going to do to this point, that it will be suitable as a highway garage. And I understand it's a big process. And the first question I asked when the opinion was coming from Mr. Quisenberry was, we are not paying him to do that right now. Mr. Casey is paying him to do that right now. And I was told by the engineer representing the town, Mr. Audi, that no architect or engineer is going to give an opinion and risk and base their reputation and risk their livelihood on unless they can back it up and believe in it. It doesn't matter who's paying them. And so, I would ask Mr. Page, Marty.
Yes.
Does it matter who pays you, or you're going to give your...
Code of ethics.
Right, okay. So I asked that exact same question because as an attorney, it's, not that you can pay an attorney to say whatever you want. I'm not saying that. However, that's a question I asked. It's very important who you represent.
The voting on this tonight, whether we vote to move it forward or not, is the first thing in a long line
process.
of checks and balances that will be in place as we move along with this. So I think right now we're stuck in the mud. We've been there for quite a while, and we're getting dirty. And I think we should move on this to decide whether we want to move forward with this. We can talk about it all night, but eventually we got to vote on whether we want to do this or just go home and forget about it. We do have a lot of checks and balances. I feel a little better about it after I asked my questions earlier and listened to what everybody here has had to say. So I think I'd like to see what people think and vote on it at this point.
Are there any other outstanding questions that need to be asked?
Mr. Quisenberry, this is a 40-year-old building. What's the life expectancy of this building?
After renovated?
All the systems of a building have different life expectancies, so there's not a certain life expectancy of the building. You do have to recognize that if you're purchasing a building with, a 40-year-old roof, which it isn't, it's a 10-year-old roof, So there's no easy way to answer that other than it is a used building. It is a 40-year-old building. Components such as the structure of the building would have a very, very, very long lifespan with maintenance. The one thing good about a town as a building owner is that you tend to take very good care of your properties because you can't just simply dismiss them. Schools that we deal with a lot. Currently in Farmington, I'm working on a design for a new high school, and a lot of it is that in the town of Farmington, our original high school, which was built in 1928, is a very important, iconic building in town, and it is important that that building is maintained as part of that project. So, well, the state of Connecticut tells us when we build a school to plan on a 50-year life, as you can tell from the town of Farmington, our school is far, far older than that, and it still is semi-functional. So there's really no way to answer that simply other than that different components, will have to be upgraded. We've identified certain things that we know are, at certain maintenance point in their lives. But I guess to the question from that part of the room, you're getting a discount certainly over a new building, and that partly covers the cost of components that might wear out in 10 or 15 years instead of 30 years.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of anyone at this point? Anybody? Okay, then I'm going to turn it over to Derek to do the process for things going forward, because if we do decide to issue a bond on this, we have to make sure that we obviously follow correct process.
Do we have to vote to accept? Is that the first? I'm looking at agenda topic 3, or is there?
Yep, discussion was 2. Number 3 is acceptance of the report as satisfactory for prior approvals, and that would be the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. But go ahead, Derek. Tell us who should go first.
Sure. With respect to the satisfactory approvals, Board of Finance, this was your condition. You should go for. You should vote first. If you deem this acceptable, then you would approve that this report that you've received satisfies your condition, and then refer it to the Board of Selectmen, who would then vote likewise to approve it. Then we move into the additional motions, and I just want to point out there, if we are going to amend the total dollar amount to $2.5 million, we do have a problem under the call of the town meeting, because we've put forth an agenda that says the town meeting is $2.4 million, or it's authorized a $2.4 million purchase. We cannot amend an agenda of a special meeting, so we would have to act on that at a separate time. So I just want to make that clear to everyone tonight.
So maybe we should discuss that for a minute. So if we have 2.4 before us, and we know 2.4 is the purchase price of the building, but we know there's another 100,000. I think if it's communicated as such, so the town understands, hey, we're asking for your approval for 2.4 to purchase this, but there will be 100, and it's like 100,000 that will be spent from pavement management, yes. And we have budgets there that we approve every year, and that will make sure that everybody's aware, eyes wide open, that this is a $2.5 million project. 2.4, which is being asked for right now. The other 100,000 would come in future things, and we say that right up front, that would suffice, that would support what I think Chris was talking about.
Ryan, I'm not sure that it really needs to be modified, because the resolution that we had before was a resolution authorizing the acquisition of the building. So if 2.4 is what's going towards the acquisition of the building,
right.
$100,000 doing something else doesn't really impact that.
No, I know
resolution.
it's a footnoted item that the town is aware of.
You don't have a building if you don't have a driveway.
Right. Yeah.
But I guess that was never part of the scope of what the developer was going to do. That was kind of an after thing where,
But I'm comfortable. I mean, in my mind, I'm comfortable that, because to your point, Derek, we can't amend that, right? And we'd have to go to a separate, regular meeting of Board of Finance or a separate special meeting of Board of Finance to do that. I think, to me, it's as long as we're the whole point is transparency. So if, as long as we're communicating, hey, the purchase price 2.4, and here's a footnoted $100,000 that will be spent to get our road where it needs to be. So the town says, okay, I know I'm voting on 2.4 right now, but I know it's really a $2.5 million project. That, to me, meets we're good, in my mind. So with that, I think what I'm hearing is we're looking for a motion from the Board of Finance on number 3 to accept the report and the opinion of the architecture as satisfactory. Satisfactory, right?
Yeah, we need to do a voting rights.
Oh, yes, good point. So we are missing one board member, Brian Cost. So do you want to give John Sullivan?
Who's up?
You can give it to John.
Make a motion that John Sullivan replace Brian.
Yep.
I second.
Okay, motion made, second, all in favor? Aye. All right, so John's got voting rights. Thank you.
This is a very narrow vote, just to say this is.
Do we accept satisfactory meets the condition that we put forward?
Certainly changes right up until the last minute, doesn't it?
Can you speak into the mic?
It's just a little disconcerting that the report seems to have changed so recently, like it's hot off the presses.
But that's not what we're proving, that the opinion of the architect and that's here that's saying if we do these other things, I get what you're saying is the changes have been changing, the separate thing that was approved. That's what you're talking about.
Well, I think one of the things we need to keep in mind here, and this is, seems like an obvious thing, this developer, there's a time value of money here, that the longer we take, the more it costs him. And so out of good faith, I have tried to keep the process moving because I do know that there's money at stake here. However, we do need to exercise our diligence, which we certainly have been. We've been considering this for quite some time. But you're right, some things did just come to light because of that transaction that we discussed that ended up in the new property that we were able to annex to make the circulation much more suitable for the garage. But your point is well taken. This is an ever-evolving process.
I'll make the motion that we accept the report as satisfactory.
Is it report or opinion?
It's the architect's opinion. I think we're saying.
Opinion. It's an opinion of contingent upon changes.
Yeah, and it says that in it, right? It says if we make all of the changes that have been.
And that's what we asked for. We said as renovated. After it's renovated, will the garage be suitable? Will the 1160 be suitable as a highway garage? We all know it isn't right now in its current state.
I think at the time, though, when we made that motion, it was the building suitable? It wasn't contemplated there was going to be lots of renovations to it.
I disagree.
Not to the extent that they will have to be made.
Yeah, you got to use the mic so people can hear you.
It's not to the extent that they have to be made, but they're pretty extensive renovations, considering a new floor, new roofing, or work to the roof. They're pretty major, and having to put on 8 new doors.
Right.
Yep. So I've got a motion made. Do I hear a second? I'll second it. All right, so motion made, second. Any further discussion on the motion? Call for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? 3-3. Means it fails.
The motion fails, which means we don't need to vote. And I imagine we can probably, Derek, skip to public comment at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. Then the next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Okay, we see some. Chris?
Thank you. Warren Packard. The subject of silk purses and sow's ears comes to mind on hearing all of this. The fact you've had so many meetings and so long a delay suggests to me that there's a real undercurrent of misunderstanding, lack of understanding of this whole project. My suggestion is you've got your dog and tails reversed. The whole thing started with redevelopment project for Filer Place area. It's come down to a snag with removing or moving the highway garage to an undesirable spot. It was recently pointed out in this conversation that for about an additional $1 million, you could have a brand new building that potentially has a 50-year life at least. Why are we trying to make a silk purse out of sow's ear? We've been through this renovation process before. With all of these changes that we heard for the first 3/4 of an hour here, we're buying a bag of trouble. Why do it this way? Why don't you spend some time looking at who the developer is, find out if they really are valid, whether they really have a plan that the town likes, and then spend the extra $1 million and get it done with. Thank you.
Gordon Stagg, 15. Is this come? Can you hear me? Up close?
Now we can.
Like this? When you're 80, it takes longer. I agree with Warren Packard completely. Two things. One, I would like the select person and all of you to make sure you know how the people who are going to use this building feel. I have reason to believe that they have not bought in yet to this, that maybe you've skipped a step. And I don't know how many of you up there could answer that question. I mean, there's a lot of really good people we have that work out of the current building, which isn't bad, by the way. They don't think it's bad. I think it's very important to get their input. If you've already got it, then that's a wasted comment. But I really hope you'll assure yourselves that you know how they feel, what their opinions are. The second thing is, Warren just brought it up, I think we need to know what the developer's plans are for Filer Place and on. We could make a big, big mistake there. And I don't know why. I mean, it's not just $240,000. It's Filer Place, and what are they going to do with it when it's run out? And that really concerns me. It could change the whole aspect of Suffield. I want to thank you for all the good work you're doing, but just be sure you're getting down deep enough before you go forward. Thank you.
I think Chief Belmore.
Yes, Tom Belmore, 1031 Mountain Road. I have some real concerns on this project. We heard tonight there's different questions on, is there enough turning radius on the south side now with the land? And the question of where the line is, we thought it was here, but it's not surveyed, so we're not really sure. But yet, we're hearing, trust us because we're professionals. I was here back when we were proposing the first renovations and the questions were asked about the building. And we were assured that because we are professionals that this building is going to work. And there was an awful lot of questions that night that you found out were pretty accurate. We made a lot of changes. And now we're trying to say we're going to trust you this time with what you're bringing us, but you don't have any facts. I heard a lot of questions up there and I didn't hear everything because we can't hear in the back. But I really feel very uncomfortable with taking this to a town meeting. I don't know how you can vote to spend $2.4 million and you don't really know all the facts and you got to spend some money to find them. I think the process just doesn't work in town government. I think we try to go back to what Warren was saying. Let's go do it the traditional way. Go out and find a piece of property or have a property that we own, find out what it costs to build a new building and build it if that's what we're going to do. And then at least we know what we're buying when we come to a town vote. The other questions I had, and I guess because you didn't pass the motion tonight, we don't have to worry about the meeting next week that we were going to vote to have it done. Are we going to have another town hearing? You don't see too many people here. I didn't know this meeting was going on until somebody asked me this morning if I was going, and I hadn't. You know, we're trying to keep this above board here. I don't think many people know that this meeting was tonight. And I have two other questions. This building, when you got the prices, is prevailing wages figured into this building? And if it isn't, why not? If we build a town building, we have to follow prevailing wages. And I think if you really got challenged in court, they are building a building for the town using town money, and it has to be followed through prevailing wages. Who's going to be responsible when it's all done and it's not done to prevailing wages, and then somebody challenges it afterwards? Who's going to pay the bill? And finally, how do we get this onto a referendum? It's been brought up every time we've been meeting on all these different proposals, and I can't remember how many proposals we've had. The townspeople had asked to go to a referendum. And I know at one meeting, I think one of the selectmen asked for it to go to referendum, and they said we couldn't do it because it wasn't on the call. So could somebody explain to me how we can get this thing onto a referendum if it ever gets there? If we go to a town meeting, can a motion be made on the town meeting to send it to the referendum? Or do we have to wait and then have somebody go out there and go out and get all these signatures? Because I think that's a waste of the taxpayers' time. We should be going out there. The call tonight is saying go to a town meeting. Let's get the thing done right and get the selectmen to say, let's take it to a referendum and not to a town meeting. Thank you.
Tom, just to answer your question on the referendum, what would happen, and obviously nothing's going to happen tonight, is if it did go to a town meeting, and whether it was voted up or down, the selectmen can vote to send it to a referendum, which would probably happen, but it's kind of a moot point right now. But that will be the step. You don't have to go out and get signatures or anything, because the selectmen have the right to send it to a referendum. That can be decided. That can be kind of agreed upon by the selectmen before it goes to town meeting, but it can also be voted on after the town meeting.
Why are we waiting to go to a town meeting? Why can't the 5 members of the selectmen make that decision up front? So when we go to the town meeting, we know that they have been committed, that they're going to take it to a referendum.
Well, right now it's a moot point. It's not going anywhere tonight. Or
I'm just giving some thought when it goes forward.
If you could do that, if
Yes,
you wanted
can
to.
do that. Yeah, you can do that.
But also, if a town meeting voted down the motion, you don't have to go to a referendum because it's defeated then.
You can.
Yeah.
Either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
You don't have
realize
to
that.
petition. The selectmen can send it either way. Derek, am I correct on that? Or is
Yes,
you're
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Any other public comment?
Yes,
Yeah.
you were correct. Also, Selectman Chaffetz is correct. You can vote on it beforehand. If it goes down, if you go to the referendum.
There's many ways to send it to referendum.
The one addition is the townspeople can also petition to send it
Sure,
to the
yeah.
referendum. You can either do that before the meeting or after the meeting, similar to what the selectmen do. So there's 4 different ways to send the question to the county. Either the people or the board of selectmen before, or the people or the board of selectmen after.
Okay, could I comment on that too, that we have 5 elected people that are representing the town, and I've heard it a number of times from the townspeople, we want this to go to a referendum. So let's do it right. Let's not ask people to go out and get, I don't know how many signatures you have that go to a referendum. 5 people can make it happen. Let's make sure it happens. And then my other question I haven't heard on is this a prevailing wage project?
This is not a question and answer. However, we opened the door by allowing this one. The model of this project is for the town to purchase a turnkey project. We're not managing the project. We're just making sure that we get the quality and the specifications that we are asking for. And so that's a different model than we've used before. You've made it very clear that you don't want to change the way we've done things. You want us to do it the way we've always done it, and go out and have our piece of property and do it that way. And that is a model, and that is a very clear standpoint. This is a different standpoint, and it's a different way to do things, which other towns do. And so prevailing wage does not have to be included because the town isn't hiring it. And again, it's not public money until it's done being used to purchase it, because no public money is going to trade hands unless it's ready to go. So.
All right, I'll give you an example. When we built the firehouse in West Suffield Center, we talked about having somebody build the building and then we'd buy it and we wouldn't have to go through prevailing wages. And at that time, legal opinion was, if you're going to spend town money and you know it in advance, you have to pay prevailing wage. I'm not for prevailing wage. My concern is who's going to pay for it after when somebody challenges it.
So that was a very different situation because that was town property. But we're going to move off of that at this point. Thank you for your public comments. Are there any other different public comments at this time? Okay. Hearing none, I would like to thank Mr. Casey and Mr. Quisenberry for coming here. We have put you through an unprecedented amount of due diligence, and you have answered every question we've given you, and I want to thank you so much for what you've done. I apologize for the fact that these boards, at least two of us, have really suggested that we would move forward if you produce something. In my opinion, you produced it. However, we don't have the support of the boards right now. And so I apologize for that. And I thank you for your time. And thank you to these boards for their input. It looks like there is, at this point, in this juncture, not a desire to move forward. Change in this town has always been very hard, and I guess this is one more example of that. And so if anyone else has any closing comments at this time, I would invite them to make them now.
Yeah, I would. I'd respond to what you just said and say that I think people would take a look if it's a new building on our town property or we bought the property. I think part of the problem is there's a lot of reservations about buying a 40-year-old building. And I've heard that from lots of people in town.
Then out of respect for this developer who has already expended quite a bit of money, I wish that we would have come to that conclusion many, many months ago before the town invested time, effort, and many of our town employees' time. And to address the fact out there, the Highway Department and Mark Servioni have been involved in every step of this way. And so if their concerns are out there that they did not find this building suitable, they certainly didn't communicate it to us. So I don't want the town of Suffield to have the reputation that it is not worth investing with us because we don't follow through on our projects or that we are too difficult to do business with. I think that would be very bad for us. And I'm concerned that in this situation we may have made that point very loud and clear. But at any rate, we are where we are. Whether this deal can go forward if you are to produce anything else for us, I do not know. That would be up to the separate boards to decide. But I think at this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the Board of Selectmen.
One more
Yes, please.
comment. When we were talking about originally the Wicks property and putting up a new building and
Yes.
leasing it for $3.4 million, I don't believe there was ever a formal vote taken. I can recall the Board of Finance indicated they weren't too crazy about spending $3.4 million.
Correct.
So I'm not quite sure. I'd like to get an idea of what
I'd like to respond.
What they would like to, what they feel is a good amount to spend, or the proper amount to spend on a new building. Because frankly, I would like, I think all of our choices would be a new building. I think that's.
Yeah. And we went down that road.
I'd like to speak to that because I think one of the concerns on that $3.4 million project was the fact that we were never going to own the land, or we did not know if we were going to own the land.
Right.
A land lease was not attractive. I think the $3.4 million was a reasonable number if it could be verified. I was looking at Cromwell. I pulled you up on my phone while we were talking here. It's a 24-bay garage, covered garage, multiple wash bay. It's a much grander scale project for $9+ million, which also includes salt sheds and waste transfer movement. And it's a totally different scale. 3.4 million, I think, is a very viable project. I also always had a problem with this project from the get-go, in that I did not like having the two different projects tied together. I felt that Filer Place should be treated independently of the other building. And to tie the two together, I think, was a mistake, and I think that they should be treated as separate transactions. That way it's clear for the town to understand what's going on. That's always been my opinion. That's speaking on my own.
So if we can find a piece of property and put up a building for $3.4 million.
I have been proposing that continuously
I think
since the get-go, and I've talked about the fact I took the GIS maps that are on the town. I looked at the fire station over on E Street that I've mentioned in the past. It's a 3.5 acre parcel. The fire station on that parcel is quite small. There's a large parking lot to the left of that fire station that could easily be an entrance and egress onto a less heavily traveled road, i.e. Thompsonville. And you would take the sports field, since we're now talking about tearing down Bridge Street School and putting in soccer fields, you could transfer those 2 soccer fields to the Bridge Street School site, have better, probably, soccer fields, and build the highway garage next to the Fleming. And I think that would be a much more logical place to put it. It's more central to the town. It's also a better location. And it also is it doesn't have a lot of these sightline issues that we're talking about with this property.
And
We
I
also
think
have
our
the
town, I
property-
think
we
our
also-
town planner
excuse me,
opines on
Excuse
that.
me, we also have the properties on Betty Lane, which is another 12 acres of land that could be configured. I would love to see those properties seriously considered for a garage.
Well, I think what we should do at this,
I do want to make one more point, hold on, that the town planner went over every single one of these properties many, many months ago. And, I mean, do you want to speak to it at all, or I think that...
Or
Are
we
you
can even get a
absolutely
recap on
certain
it
that we couldn't
in our
fit
next
that
meeting?
on the without tearing up a soccer field? Is that the cause? Is that the concern?
We could probably discuss this at a later meeting,
Yeah, I
but
mean, we can
I
have
don't
a-
want
we
it
can
to
have
be
them come at our next
reflected
meeting and speak
anywhere
to it.
that we didn't already go through this due diligence,
Yeah.
regardless of any individual member's opinions here. Our town planner, who is the expert on this, has done a very thorough research. It was where we started to get all this. We
The
can
idea is
revisit
this
it
was a
again.
tri-board meeting, so all of us could compare notes and I think Tim asked a very fair question, which is
Yes.
3.4 million a blockade for spending? And I was responding to that question. Thank you.
I don't think we can let this just drop, the issue that we need a town garage and we want to get development in Filer Place, whether it's done independently or together. And I know you don't like everything being tied in like that. I think what should happen from now on, I'm disappointed, that we haven't been able to do anything. Maybe some good will come of it down the road. But I think we should, almost right away, we have to keep plugging away at this and get something done. New building, then the garage will come down. Filer Place you're still going to have that polluted property. It's going to be a lot harder to sell, I think, at that point. But you never know. Something might come along. At least get part of it done. But I think we should stay on top of it and maybe, again, review those properties just to make sure that we're all on the same playing field. And I think it's better to have all of us at the meeting to do it. And
So what I'm hearing right now is, and I just want to make sure this is clear, that we shouldn't be entertaining any other existing buildings at this time. I would like to take a...
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, given what we've heard, I think we need to revisit existing property and new building on town property. I think I agree with you, that was done before, but
We'll
let's
do it
take a
again.
refresh of that to make
Sure.
sure that, is there any opportunity there,
Yep.
to Chris's point? Exhaust that or say, hey, there's an opportunity there, move forward on that. If there's not, then we move on to
Because I don't
new
wanna
building
waste-
on other property that is purchased.
I don't want to waste another developer's time
Yeah.
when we don't intend to move forward. And so I want to be very clear
we'll
here.
waste our own time. But
Or whatever, my time, whatever. But, yeah,
But
I wanna be clear.
I would like to see that I'm not gonna walk away and say, oh, darn, they didn't do it, and I'll get mad about it. We gotta do something about it, okay? And that's, so we gotta.
Well, this is about I don't know, the third or fourth avenue we've gone down that didn't go forward, and we've just, I come back, I bring you something else. I'll certainly do that.
But I think it's a good point, Tim. We should do it as a tri-board again, or
Sure.
we should hear the same thing, the same time,
Fine.
talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and we do it.
And as far as getting people out to meetings, that's their problem. The meetings, I think, are pretty well publicized. People seem to know what's going on. But people don't want to come and sit for 2 or 3 hours. And so I can't, to Tom's point, I can't help it if people don't pay attention to know when the meetings are.
Mr. Casey, would you like to address the boards?
Yes.
You seem to be standing there.
I'd like to thank all the boards, including Planning and Zoning and the Economic Development Committee, the Permanent Building Committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Finance for taking 7, 8, 9 months of work on this collectively. Someone, in almost an asinine way, mentioned that this thing was being rushed through. And it would be funny, except it's not funny tonight for me, that we've spent, the better part of a year trying to work through the issues that we thought would be satisfactory for the town. When I started this, I want to, it's not an editorial, it's just a comment that there are several different constituencies in this town. There are people who stood up at a public meeting and said, we don't need any new garage. We like the garage the way it is. It's been fine for us. There are obviously people who are more inclined to understand that the center of Suffield, Mountain Road, and Filer Place are looking a little shabby, and that there are people who are content with that, and that there are people who want to try and move that forward in some way. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I can't thank the first Selectwoman enough for being open to every item that came up and my efforts to address them. And I suppose it's the Board of Finance that either feared a town meeting or for whatever reason didn't feel it warranted a town meeting, which I think is unfortunate, because I think the town, regardless of the few people here who felt, they're entitled to come and comment, there's a big town out there, and I thought it would have been more fair to put it in front of the town. So I suppose it's not something that can be reconsidered, but I offer that up to say that I think there would be very little lost in offering it to the town under the circumstances that we've provided. But I thank you for your time and for your efforts in looking this all over. I appreciate it very much. I really appreciate it, especially the Permanent Building Committee, and listening to their feedback and trying to work with them on that. So thank you very much.
Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Board of Selectmen?
I'll make that motion. To adjourn?
Yep. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to adjourn for Board of Finance?
I read that motion.
Ann made it. Chris, second. All in favor? Aye.
And then PPC? Joe, you want to do your motion? Did you do it?
You guys got a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn on the Public Building Committee.
Thank you.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.